Good morning. Welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman, and today I'm going to be working with you on stripping up your stash, but we're going to use those strips for a paper piece technique. We're going to make a pumpkin table runner. This is going to be a lot of fun, and it's a great way to use all those leftover pieces of pumpkin fabric and green fabrics and background fabrics. It'll be a lot of fun. Let's see how this is done. I started putting the pattern together. It's not even written out with the instructions yet. So far I have the picture of the table runner and the two blocks. The table runner can be made as long as you want, and what I've done here is I've laid 4 of the pumpkins so that they're facing the people on that side of the table, and these 4 pumpkins are facing the people that are sitting on this side of the table. I'm actually going to just make my table runner today with these 4 pumpkins here and these 2 flying geese units. The flying geese units are great because you can use that center section there to put your centerpiece on your table, and that way you're not really hiding a pumpkin. So let's go ahead and take a peek at the strips that I have scrapped up here and how I'm going to proceed with this and the paper piece pattern. I do have a couple of those paper piece patterns here. This is the pumpkin. There's 2 different sections that I'll be piecing, paper piecing with for my pumpkin, and I have 3 different, actually it's 1 complete section, but there's 3 parts to this for my flying geese. I have made a photocopy of this page twice. I've made a photocopy of this page 4 times because I'm only going to make 4 pumpkins. And I've also stripped up my stash based upon these measurements. I like to strip up my stash into rectangles and squares to cover all of these elements. And then I'm ready to go as I'm putting together all of the different parts of my paper piece project. So let's see what I have cut. First of all, I think I'll show you the scraps that I grabbed. I just grabbed chunks of fabric that I found in my oranges, and they're more of a softer orange. They're not the really dark, bright oranges, so that's what I've pulled. They have kind of a yellow undertone to them. So I've pulled those. I did pull a brighter orange, and I'm going to use that, I think, for my binding on the outside. I used this darker gold with orange for the pumpkin, for the little stems, as well as I think I'm going to go ahead and use that for my flying geese units and for the cornerstones that I have in this picture here. You can use whatever fabrics you want. You can make this as scrappy as you want, or maybe you just want a 3-color project. Whatever you have on hand is something that you can use, so I encourage you to do that. So now let's take a peek at the parts and pieces that I have cut. I brought you a little closer here so you can see what I've done. I have literally measured these parts and pieces to identify what size strips I need to cut. And I measured this strip. Let me get my ruler and a pencil so I can point this out. I measured this from the dotted line on the template to dotted line. That includes that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Whenever you see a solid line and a dotted line, the space in between there is the seam allowance, and that's very important that we have that. And that measures 4 inches. And then from this dotted line to this dotted line, it measured 6.5 inches. So I cut these 4 strips for my pumpkin base, 4 inches by 6.5 inches. So I have 4 of those. So that will be my pumpkin base. It covers that entire area there. Now I need these little corner units to round off my pumpkin, and I'm going to use these little background, and they have some orange print in there, and that's what I will use on each corner to paper piece all of those. So that will actually be placed, as I paper piece it, it will be on the back, but it will turn out looking like that. And we'll have each of these done here shortly. So that's what I'm using. So I've cut out enough of those. I believe I cut 16 of these because I'm going to have 4 pumpkins, and I need 4 for each pumpkin. So that takes care of this portion of the pumpkin. Then I needed some strips here. And so what I have done, I have cut these strips. Whoops, it's these, the shorter ones. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to move this. I cut the shorter ones here. And so each of these background strips is the width, which is 2 inches, by 3.5 inches long. I need it to extend into the seam allowance here. So there's one here, here's one here, and then the center section is another piece that I've used, and that will be this dark section that I will paper piece for this part of the pumpkin. And then I have some tiny units that I'm going to paper piece, and this is the background that will be for this part. And I haven't actually cut those yet. I realized now I need to get those cut. And that will be what I'm using from my stash to prepare all of those. And I'll show you step by step how I'm going to do this. And you'll see when I work on this section here, I'll start with the tiny little background square here, which I will cut 1 inch by 1 inch squares, and that's what I'll begin with. I'll attach, that's B1, this is going to be B2, and that is this little tiny one here that I will attach to that. So that will become the center section, and then I will add these longer pieces to each section. And you'll see all of this here in just a minute, and that will create this rectangle unit, which will be sewn to the pumpkin itself. So that's how that will be done, and you'll see that momentarily. Now let's take a look at the flying geese. For the flying geese, that's where I'm using these longer strips, so A14 and A12, and they are the last two pieces that are attached to this section. I cut those at 2 inches wide by 5.5 inches long. And then I've also cut rectangles for my triangles in the center. And this is the fabric that I'm going to be using for those rectangles. And I've actually cut them way bigger than what I needed them, but I needed 1 3/4 by 3.5. And I think I cut these are really quite wide. I don't need them quite this wide, but they are 3.5 inches wide, so they extend into the seam allowance. And I'll have 4 of those there. And then I need to cut 8 squares of the background. And you know, I'm not sure if I'm going to use this background or if I'm going to go with this one. I haven't decided yet. I might use this background here. I haven't actually cut those, but I'll cut a total of 2, 4, 6, 8. I'll have a total of 16 because I'll be making 2 of these blacks. And again, you'll see how I'll piece this all together here in just a moment. So I have finished one pumpkin here. Here's the body of the pumpkin with these 4 corners on it, and here is the top of the pumpkin with the stem. And I'll just need to remove the paper, and then I can put these 2 units together to create the pumpkin itself. Now let's take a look at how I did that. The first thing I did, the paper it's got both elements printed on the paper, the pumpkin part and the top stem part. I just cut it apart with a scissors in between the dash lines there, so I'm working with 2 separate pieces. It just makes it much easier. And then on the pumpkin part, on the back side, I placed the large pumpkin, the 4 by 6.5 inch section, so that it matched up this bottom area perfectly. So that's the base of the pumpkin. Then I placed these light colored rectangles in each corner, and I've pinned them, so everything is pinned down. I will be able to take this then to the sewing machine, and I will be able to stitch on the dark line here from one spot there to the end. And I'm going to make sure that my stitching length is small. I put mine at 1.8, which will allow the paper to rip off much more easily when we need to rip the paper from this and remove all of that. So I have changed my stitch length to 1.8. I will make sure I start stitching right there at that point there, that intersection, and go over here. And I'll do that on all 4 of these. And then I'm going to bring it back to the tabletop, and using my 1/4 ruler, I'm going to butt up this to the bottom section and trim away the excess fabric. And I'll do this first. I'm going to sew this, then I'm going to show you how to use this ruler to cut away the excess fabric. And that is what I've done on this. I basically moved everything away, laid it down on my tabletop, butted this up on that line, and got rid of this excess fabric that was there. So now I'm going to take this to the machine here. I've made sure my stitch length is down at a 1.8 or even a 2, just something smaller than a normal stitch length. And I am going to start stitching right at this point, coming over to here and stopping. I will back tack on each spot there, but I will not go into the seam allowance. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm putting my needle down in that intersection. There we go. And what I can do right now is reach under and get rid of the pin. All right. So that one is stitched. As you can see on that side, when I flip it back, it is stitched. I'm going to do the same thing to the other three, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to cut away the excess fabric. On the back side, you'll see that I've stitched from this intersection here to that intersection on all four parts. And if I flip it over, I can finger press all of these open. And now what I want to do is get rid of this excess fabric here. We have two pieces of, or two triangles that do not need to be there. So I'm going to fold back on that stitching line. The paper has been folded back. And these two excess pieces of fabric are right here, the triangles. The good fabric is right here laying on the nice orange fabric. We don't want to do anything with that. We just want to get rid of this excess. And so I'm going to take my add a quarter ruler, and it has this ledge or a ridge back here, I guess, and I'm going to butt it up to that paper. You can feel where the edge of the paper is and the fabric, and I'm going to butt it right up to that and cut away this excess. There's two pieces of fabric there that we don't need. Now we just have this fabric and that one, and I will eventually square the whole thing up to be a rectangle that's 4 by 6.5 inches. And so you'll see that I've gotten, when I bring this paper back out, you'll see that I have trimmed away this excess, and that is still there. I'm going to go ahead and do that on all four sides. And then I'm going to square up this piece to 4 inches by 6.5 inches. So again, I'm going to fold that paper back underneath, take my add a quarter ruler, butt it up to that little ridge there, get rid of the excess. We are good to go there. All right, come over here, take the paper, fold it back on that line, butt up my ruler, get rid of that. We are good to go. And one more time, here we go. Fold the paper back on the line, cut away the excess. All right, so we have everything here. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go press it first of all, and once I've pressed it with the iron, then I'm going to come back here and actually trim away everything, the paper and the excess fabric. I'm going to cut on the dotted line. I must maintain my 1/4 inch seam allowance, so I'm going to cut away on the dotted line. Let me show you on this side what I mean by that. So here is extra fabric that is coming away. Whoops, I didn't cut all the way through there. That's the extra fabric that we got rid of, so that this edge is nice and straight. And now I'll need to do the same thing here and over there. Let me go press everything and I'll bring it back and show you. I've taken my ruler, I did press this at the iron, and I have lined the ruler up on the dotted line because I've got to maintain that 1/4 inch seam allowance. I cannot cut it away at this dark solid line or I've eliminated my seam allowance. I must maintain my seam allowance. So I have trimmed everything so that it fits that dotted line all the way around here. And the last one that I have to do is this side here. And you can see some of the parts and pieces that I had trimmed away, including the paper. So here, let's cut this last one here. So this is some of the stuff that's coming away. And there is the pumpkin. So the pumpkin is all set to go, and next I'm going to start working on the stem area up here that will go above the pumpkin. And I'll show you now how I'm going to proceed with that. I've added this gray mat here. I think you can see things better because of the white paper on the white mat. It was kind of hard to see what was going on there. But the pumpkin here, this peach-colored pumpkin, is ready to go. Now I'm making the stem portion, so I need to paper piece the stem. And there's a B1, B2, B3, and B4. So that is the order in which I'm going to paper piece this. And the B1 is the light fabric right here, so I've placed that down and made sure that it's covered that section entirely, and you can actually hold this to the light and make sure you can look through it and make sure that the light fabric covers that entirely with seam allowances all the way around. Then I needed to lay the B2 fabric on top of that, and I'm going to be stitching on this little line right here, and it's kind of at an angle, which means that when this fabric goes up, it's going to come up at an angle, and I've got to make sure that even though it's stitched at an angle, that it will in fact cover everything under that section. So it's important that you make sure that you've laid it on there properly. I'm kind of moving it over like that, which will ensure that when it gets stitched at a diagonal right there, it will come up and still cover that. So let me take this to the sewing machine and show you how I'm going to do that, and you'll understand more clearly what I'm saying about that diagonal. I'm going to stitch from that line to that line, stopping at both of those intersections there. I definitely do not want to stitch beyond these lines at all. You need to stop exactly on those two areas there. So I will be doing that. Again, my stitch length is at 1.8. You can have yours at 2, 1.8, whatever works. And that's all that I'm going to stitch right now, and then I'll remove it and show you. I'll flip the fabrics so that you can see what it's going to look like. Once I get it under the machine and have everything lined up, then I'm going to remove this pin. I don't want that pin in there, but I'm going to first of all line it up, and then I'll remove that. I'm going to put my needle down at that intersection. There we go. Remove the pin. The pin is now gone. And I'm going to just do a back stitch or two. Come right to that point, do a back stitch. Okay. And we're going to cut this away. All right, so that's all that I stitched was that little line right there. And when I open this up here, you can see that it's been stitched on a diagonal. And you've got to make sure that it covers everything behind there. And I can see, you probably cannot, but I can see that that dark fabric has covered everything under B2, so I am good. And the light fabric covered everything under B1, so that entire stem there is good to go, and it's got seam allowances on all sides, so we are just fine. I'm going to go ahead and put a pin right here just to kind of keep that open so it doesn't flap shut and get sewn. Now I'm going to attach B3 back on this side. Let me grab it. That is this background fabric, and B3 is in there, so I'm simply going to put it right sides together. Make sure you can see what I'm doing. I'm lining it up there, and then I'm going to bring it around to the back here, and I will stitch from here to there, exactly from here to there. And I'm doing that in, make sure you can actually see that here. I'm stitching from there to there. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I will bring it back here so you can take a peek at it. I just stitched from there to there. Let's flip it over, take a peek. There we go. And what I'm going to do in a minute is I'm going to fold this paper back, take it to my cutting mat, and I'm going to trim away this excess. We don't need this excess there. But before I do that, I'm just going to go ahead and add the other section and have all of my sewing done here at the machine. So this is the section that I want to add next. Do it just exactly the same way that I did before. Going to line it up there. Going to come around to the back. I am going to stitch from there to there, exactly from there to there. And then that side will be ready, and then I'm going to take it to my cutting board or my cutting mat and get rid of the excess fabric. So it is done. Now I need to trim away excess here. I need to trim away excess here, and there, so that it matches that perfectly. I'm not sure if you can see that whole thing or not, but let me take you to the tabletop. I think that you can see it better there. I've trimmed this side. I flipped it over on the paper side, and I'm using the dotted lines as my guide, and I am trimming on the dotted lines. Oh, I'm too close to the screen there. Okay, here we go. Okay, we got rid of all of that. I'm making sure everything underneath is laying just as it should. And I do still have some excess fabric underneath that I'm going to get rid of here in a minute too. I'll show you how I'm going to do that. I just happened to start on the excess of the dotted lines first. So, whoops. Okay, so we have this ready, but what we do need to do is get rid of this excess. So I'm going to fold that down, take this at a quarter ruler, butt it up. So I'm butting up this ridge with that paper ridge and that seam allowance right there. I'm getting rid of that excess fabric. So I did that one side. Now I'm going to go to the other side, fold back the paper on the line, add the ruler, and get rid of this excess fabric on this side. And we have our strip ready to be added to the top of our pumpkin. So I'm going to press it, I'm going to remove the paper, and then I'm going to show you how this can be sewn to the top of the pumpkin. For both of these units, I'm simply going to remove the paper. So that one has been removed. And we'll come back over here and get this gone. There we go. All right, now I can stitch this to this top of this pumpkin, just like I'm working here. I've got this one pinned. I'm going to go over and bring it to the machine and stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance and get the top of that pumpkin stitched to the bottom. I'll bring it back. The pumpkins are done. They're ready to go. And now we are going to work on the flying geese unit. And that involves these rectangles here, which are going to be the flying geese base units. I'm going to be cutting some more of these squares, or actually rectangles, to cover up. They're going to be the A2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 13, and 11 as I work my way up. I'll start with this base down here. I'll add these triangles to it, and then we'll keep working our way up the flying geese unit. The last 2 items that we'll place on the unit will be these 2 sidebars. I'm going to make 4 of these pumpkins, and as I said earlier, you can make these as scrappy as you want. I know some of the pinks are very popular, and teals are very popular for pumpkins and for the fall harvest decor, so that might be something you'll want to try. So I'll complete 2 more of those, but right now I want to show you how we're going to do this flying geese unit. I have photocopied 2 of these foundation or paper pieces here, and I'm going to start at the bottom, which is A1, and then we're going to attach A2 and A3 and continue working up the line till we get the center done, and then we'll add the 2 sidebars. And to do that, there's a really easy way to figure out how to line this up. When I put this on here originally, I simply placed my strip, as I showed you earlier, I simply cut strips of fabric from all of the different colors to use for my paper piecing. And so this strip, which is a rectangle, is what I'm using for the base for my flying geese. And it's kind of hard to know where to place the second part, or the side pieces of this flying geese. So what I did was this. Let me show you. On the front of it, I simply folded back the on the line right here on that dark line. So I folded that back, and that showed me exactly where that line is. So I knew exactly where to lay my dark color. So that was laying on there first. And then I took this, I had a quarter ruler, I butted it up to that edge and trimmed away the excess of that rectangle. It had originally looked like that. It extended beyond, and I got rid of that. So that was trimmed away, so that is a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance for that side. Then I came over to this side, and I folded it on that line, going this direction. And again, put that 1/4 inch seam allowance there, and originally this is what that looked like, and I trimmed away that excess portion there. So now I have a piece here. This is my flying geese unit. It's right in here, and I need to line up my extensions to that flying geese, or the wings, if you will, even with this. So all I simply have to do is line it up just like that, and then I know that it will match beautifully. In fact, I'm going to take this here, pin it right there, and if I flip it over, and I can see through the paper to see that there is definitely a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around there, and so we're good to go. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch on this line. I'm starting on A3. You can start on A2 or A3. It doesn't matter which side you start on because they're identical. But I'm going to sew from this point here to this point there exactly. You do not want to sew into the next unit. You want to start and stop exactly where those dark lines start and stop. And again, make sure that your stitch length is short, maybe a 1.8 or a 2.0, so that it's shorter than normal, and that will allow you to easily remove this paper when we're done. So I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine. Remember, we're doing the stitching on the paper side, which has all of the dark lines. That's where we're doing the actual stitching. But the actual flying geese unit is going to be created on the back side of that. I have stitched this side and this side, and I have my base in here and these two wings. So they are both on there, but now I've got to trim all of this up. And the way I'm going to do that, first of all, I'm going to finger press these. I'm going to come back to the front here, and I'm going to fold along this line right here. And then I'm going to take my add a quarter ruler here with that edge. It's got a lip there, if you will. I'm going to line that up right there. It's butted right up to the edge of the paper. And I will get rid of all this excess fabric right here. So that is the top of my triangle. Now I need to do the same thing on both sides. So I'm going to fold on this side right here. So that's folded perfectly on that line. Oops, I've got it cockeyed here. And I'm going to cut away that excess there. Come around to the other side. I'm going to fold on that line right there. I'm going to cut away that excess there. And I will eventually get rid of this excess down here too. There's too much, but I'm not going to worry about the bottom of that at this point. So the top of my flying geese, the wings have been attached, and that's working out just fine. The next thing I'm going to do is add another one of my base pieces, and that will get stitched along here. So I am lining up the top of it perfectly even with this. Let me pin it. I don't want things flipping around. When you turn these, flip them over to get them sewn, sometimes these can fly backwards and you end up stitching them where you're not supposed to. So putting a pin there helps to keep everything laying flat. Now I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and I'm going to stitch from that line right there straight across right here. And that will attach this base triangle. So I just stitched from there to here on that solid line. I stopped exactly on the line. I did not extend into the next piece. It's important that you stitch only on the lines and stop at the beginning and ending. I'll flip it over, bring this up, and I can finger press it. We got some threads in there. I got to get rid of those threads here. Little pieces that need to get out of the way. And so we've got a beautiful point there, and I'll finger press that. And now what I need to do to find out where my angles are, I'm again going to flip it over. I'm going to crease this paper on that solid line there. That helps me locate where that line is. This is going to give me my 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Get rid of that there. Now I'm going to fold on this solid line here. Use my fingers there. And again, I'm going to get rid of this excess. And all these little pieces like this can become crumbs that you can use for crumb quilting. So I'm saving those that are big enough for crumb. So I folded here, and that helped to identify the next Flying Geese unit, and I have my 1/4 inch seam allowance included in that. Now what I'm going to do is grab my wings. Here are the wings. I'm going to add that right there. I will pin it so that it doesn't flip-flop around. And I'll take it to my sewing machine and I will stitch from that point to that point. And then I will have that wing done. And then I'll do the same on this side. And I'll just continue working my way up, adding each of the wings, then adding the base. That base gets sewn here. Then adding each of the wings, then adding the base, and adding each of the wings until that whole section is done. And once that whole section is finished and trimmed, then I'll come back and I'll get rid of this excess fabric because there's a lot of excess on the bottom there, but I'm not worrying about it at this point. I will trim up that center so that it will have the seam allowance and it will follow these dotted lines on each end plus a seam allowance for this, the sidebars. I've added 2 more wings, as you can see here. Now what I'm going to do is come up here to the front where the guide is, the pattern, and fold it on that solid line. I'm folding it on this solid line here, and that allows me to know exactly what I need to trim away. So I'm trimming away excess wings here, fabric that I don't need. And these are big enough that I might be able to use those in crumb quilting, so I'm going to keep those. So that was done. Now the next thing I'm going to do is fold this on this solid line here because I want to trim away the excess that is beyond that solid line there. And you can see that excess. Get rid of that. And I'm going to do the very same thing over here. Fold on this solid line. Line up my 1/4, add a 1/4 seam ruler there, get rid of that. All right, there we go. So we have a Flying Geese unit here and here. I'm going to do 2 more just like this. Again, I'm simply going to add the base right here, pin it, and I can take it to the machine and stitch across that line right there, starting and ending exactly at those points. Then I'll flip that base up and press these 2 triangles like I shared with you before, get rid of the excess so I'll have the diagonal seams there. so I'll know where to add my wings and continue doing this all the way up. Years ago, I got in the habit of using my fingernails to fold back, but really you should use a ruler. Fold back and press that so that there's a nice crease along that solid line. That way you're definitely accurate in that fold line. I had just started using my fingernails as my guide years ago, and that's what I find myself doing a lot. But take advantage of this ruler in any way you can. So I have this fourth base ready to go, and I'm simply going to add both of these outer edges, this wing, and then I'll have the center section done, and then I'll be adding these outside edges in just a moment. The Flying Geese unit is finished. I've got the sidebars sewn on, the centers are sewn on. You can see that there's a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance down there, which we need to sew this into the unit, and we have the 1/4 of an inch up here as well. The next thing I can do is take it around back and again cut away the excess on the dotted line. That just gets rid of excess paper or fabric if you have extra fabric. And then you can simply rip everything out so that you have nothing left but the block itself. I'm going to make 2 of these. I'm going to make 4 of these. Again, you can make this table runner as long as you want to, just by making more pumpkins. I'm ripping out all of the paper here. Just have a little bit left. And again, the smaller your stitch length is, the easier it is to get this paper out. It perforates so much easier if your stitch length is small. Just getting little pieces that are in the corners. But there we go. So this one is ready. The pumpkins are ready. And now I'm going to be able to go ahead and put it together. I've also stripped up my stash to include the borders. So I've got all kinds of border options here that I've put together. And I'm looking forward to getting the whole table runner put together. I'm going to get it all pieced, and then I'll bring it to my tabletop and you can see it. So I have a couple of different quilts here for you to see. This is the one I've just finished. It's my pumpkin table runner. I made my table runner here just a little bit shorter than the original pattern that I shared with you. This is a paper pieced pattern. I don't yet have the instructions written out. I just used the template, and I showed you how I went ahead and stripped up my stash, not only to strip up and make the borders and the sashing and cornerstones, but also to create the strips that I needed and the rectangles and the squares for every aspect of these blocks for the paper piecing technique. It really simplifies that technique. I love using that. In fact, I've used that same technique for this quilt. And this is my Shield Ferns quilt, which you'll see this in the Quilt Art Engagement Calendar for 2024. This is a book that Claudine Hanson has put out for many, many years. We're going to miss her so much. But this is the quilt of mine. It's something that I use my paper piecing techniques, but I used my strip up my stash as I put this together. So each and every block, as well as each and every border, was stripped into rectangles and different sizes depending on what I needed for each block, and that's how I paper pieced all of this together. You probably have many paper pieced patterns, individual patterns, and books in your library. Here's one that I have from Nancy Mahoney. I love this. It's a fabulous book. There's some great projects in here. And again, she's using strips that you can cut, and then you can subcut those strips into certain sizes, and it just really helps you as you're doing the paper piecing to ensure that every element has enough fabric to cover the area that has to be pieced. And so that's something that you'll want to take advantage of. You'll see my book set. I'll have links below. And this book here is my Speedy Solutions to Cut and Organize Your Scrap Stash. It will really help you to get your scrap stash cut, sorted, organized, stored, and ready to use to make beautiful quilts. And between the two of these, you get a total of 17 beautiful scrappy patterns. And you're using squares, strips, and templates in here. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial on how to make this fun pumpkin table runner. I can't wait to use it upstairs in my dining room. So I want to thank you so much for stopping by my channel and learning how to strip up your stash to use parts and pieces of your stash for paper piecing. Beautiful projects. This pattern I will have out on my website once I have all of the instructions done, but that'll take me some time, so I'll have to work on that. And just keep your eye on my website. I've got a store out there on my website that you can check out, quiltingwithlori.com. In fact, I'll have a link below so that you can find that. And you'll also see my book set out there. And I've got a gallery of many, many different quilts that you can take a peek at. But I thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you do like the content that I provide, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That really does help my channel to get out to more quilters just like yourself. Thank you so much and have a wonderful week. Happy quilting.